On the whole, the 924 is blandly unexciting, characterless and without much charm. Its biggest problem is that of noise, vibration and harshness. The gearbox is out of character too. It costs a lot of money for a car that doesn't feel fully developed. Not my words, but those of Clive Richardson, writing for Motorsport magazine in May 1977. It's a stark contrast to how Porsche is written about today, the motoring magazines of the world seemingly unable to say a bad word about the company or their cars. It's fair to say then that the 924, Porsche's first front-engine road car, was viewed in a rather negative light on release. Other criticisms levelled at the car included its gearbox options. A 4-speed manual or a 3-speed auto were the only options between its 1976 release and 1979. And its weak engine. That engine is often simply labelled as a van engine by sneering Porsche 911 enthusiasts and regular petrolheads alike, but this is not the case. Not really, as I shall now explain. Project 425, which later became the 924, began as a joint VW-Audi-Porsche project. This is often marked against the 924, but it wasn't even the first time this had happened. The mid-engine 914 was also a VW-Porsche joint project, even being badged with both companies' names in some regions. The results of Project 425 badged as VWs and Audis would act as both companies' flagships, while the Porsche badged cars would replace the 914 as their most basic model. But as with many other projects in the early 70s, the oil crisis and ensuing regulations would throw a spanner into the works. VW balked at the idea of launching a sports car into such unsteady waters, and cancelled Project 425 in favour of building the Scirocco Coupe, a much safer bet in the then current automotive climate. However, this left Porsche stranded without the 914 replacement, so they purchased VW's half of the project and set out to complete the development alone. As part of the brief for the car, the engine had to be sourced from either an existing VW or Audi model. Porsche chose to use the EA831 2-litre engine, a motor that saw incredibly varied use in a number of different variants. The Audi 100 briefly used it, as did VW with the LT van. AMC bought a license for it and used it in their Gremlin, Spirit and Concorde passenger cars, as well as the super basic Jeep DJ5G postal van. While this list of standard family cars and vans would make it seem like the 924 was fitted with a ridiculously ill-suited engine for the job, it is worth noting that the EA831 was differently modified in almost every application it found itself in. The 924 had a Porsche-specific cylinder head and Bosch fuel injection, for example, whereas all the other EA831 variants had carbs. Even if it was the same, I feel that it is very unfair to the 924 to label its engine as being from a van just because it was available in one. After all, the Mark I and Mark II Transits could be had with the 3-litre Essex V6, with its 2.9 Cologne replacement being an option for the Mark III. In a similar vein, various American school buses used Chevy's big block 427 units up until the mid-90s. Yet nobody has ever called the Essex, Cologne or 427 van engines, so why is the 924 the only car singled out for this? Maybe it's because it was an easy jab, a quick throwaway line to say after criticising the car's performance. One can easily imagine a magazine saying something along the lines of, "The acceleration seems very slow for a Porsche sports car, but once you realise the engine is from a VW van it all starts to make sense." With between 95 and 125 horsepower depending on market and model year, it's easy to see why the performance seemed lacking compared with even the base 911, which had around 150 horsepower at the time. Until 1980, the standard 924 could only be had with rear drum brakes, rather surprising considering that its 914 predecessor had discs all round. This was perhaps done because the front-engine platform of the 924 was a lot more stable than the light, mid-engine 914. In fact, the handling of the 924 was, and still is, the one thing everyone praises about the car, especially compared with the 911s of the same era, which apparently can be very twitchy and unforgiving if driven poorly. The way the 924 went round corners was a marked improvement. Building off of the praise for the handling, a new 924 variant with all-round disc brakes and a more powerful engine was the obvious next step, and it would arrive in 1979 with the 924 Turbo. With 170 horsepower, nearly double that of the early US spec 924s, it was faster than many more expensive sports cars. The turbo engines were also hand-built by Porsche, further distancing them from the other EA831 variants. "Fast at last," Car and Driver proclaimed. And this optimistic headline showed the general attitude that the 924 Turbo seemed to be the solution for the base 924's issues. The Turbo made for a good competition car too, with multiple variants specifically designed for racing and rallying. These were the Carrera GT, no, not that one, as well as the Carrera GTR and GTP. The latter two became well known for finishing well at Le Mans on more than one occasion, while the former was made famous as a rally car in the pre-4-wheel drive era. With the arrival of the turbo and competition success, the 924 seemed to be coming into its own in the late 70s and early 80s. Its image was slowly moving away from the poor relation of the 911 and 928 and becoming the premier small sports car. However, in 1982, this was all undone with the release of the 944. Ironically based on the 924 itself. With a multitude of changes over the base 924, including a new wholly Porsche developed engine, the 944 aimed to bridge the gap between the basic 924 and the 911. This meant it was squarely aimed at the 924 turbos market, and so the turbo was dropped in 1984 so that the 924 would remain a basic model. This had two effects on the 924. One was to show the inherent good qualities of the platform, since the 944 received rave reviews on launch. The other had a far larger impact, and was far more negative. The 944 indirectly replacing the 924 turbo led to the latter car being mostly forgotten, relegating the 924 to a mere base model in the minds of the public. This was especially sad because the 924 was only getting better with time. It was fitted with a detuned 944 engine the same year the turbo was discontinued, being renamed the 924S in the process. This new model was often faster than base 944s due to the lighter weight, but it rarely got the spotlight. The 924S would quietly cease production in 1988, with the 944 becoming the 968 in the early 90s. This new model would again be moved upmarket, moving away from the 924's basic roots. Ironically, the 968 would suffer a similar fate to the 924, being overshadowed by the 944, although it was for a different reason. While the 968 was an improvement over the 944, it sold poorly, barely managing a tenth of the 944's sales. This was not a criticism that could be levelled at the 924, which actually outsold the 944 quite considerably. And that's a significant fact to mention, as for much of its early life it was a massive aid in saving a then struggling Porsche, caught up in development of the 928 and with the very dated 911 as their only other model. I'd even go as far as to say the 924 was Porsche's second most important model, first being the also mocked Cayenne SUV. The Cayenne faced a lot of similar jabs, being called a fake Porsche and too slow, but it was also a sales success, even more so than the 924 in fact. At the end of the day, the 924 is derided for ruining Porsche's brand, when in reality Porsche probably wouldn't exist without it. 924 developments would last on sale for nearly 20 years, with the 924 itself being on sale for 12 of those. It won its class at Le Mans, was a capable rally car, served brilliantly as an introductory model for the brand, and looks far more modern than its early 70s roots would suggest. So my verdict on the 924? An easy underrated, no question about that. Have a different opinion, or perhaps you have a story to tell about owning or driving the car? Write it in the comments below. For now though, thanks for watching.